All right, so the first thing that we're going to go over, and I'm in like lifters, I might take these off, like they're not lifters, but they're just high, I might take them off. If you guys are in shoes that are uncomfortable, we'll go over the shoe topic right now. You should have something that is flat and non-squishy. So if you're in running shoes, you can just take those off now, right? If you're in sandals, we'll keep those off to the side also. You should be able to transfer power to the ground. So if you're in like CrossFit no balls or some flat shoes, that's great. If you're in some chucks or some wrestling shoes or barefoot, that's better. If you're a specialist and you have a deadlift sock, even cooler, but not necessary, right? So we get nice flat foot on the ground. That being said, when we're talking about our feet, I understand that many coaches give the cue, weight on your heels, weight on your heels. That's a good cue. But it's not necessarily where we want our feet. We want to be able to anchor our entire foot to the ground. So Drew's barefoot for us. He's going to give us a good example of how he would grab the floor. So he's going to use his entire foot, just like we have hands to grab the floor and be nice and flat. Drew, can you set up for us? Drew's a sumo board, so we're really just looking at his feet right now, right? So his feet are flat, and he's trying his best to get all of it on the floor. His weight is evenly dispersed amongst his foot. So we're going to go over where do our feet go when we start deadlifting. So in the past, I've used jumping position, which is a great one, which I would ask you guys to step either in front of or slightly behind your bar so that you don't hit yourself. You're just going to jump as high as you can 3 times. Ready, go. And stay. If you didn't stay, you cheated. So the concept would be I jump as high as I can, and when I land, that's roughly where my feet should be when I start deadlifting, right? Another concept we can do is I can have you guys hang from the bar, and then we can just go ready, drop. And then when you drop, where your feet land is roughly where we're gonna start. For most of us, it's gonna be somewhere between my armpits and underneath my hips. I would like them as close to underneath your hips as possible. You're also pulling sumo, right? Yeah, cheater. So I like mine really, really close together, and I actually flare my toes out. I'm a fairly tall individual. You're also fairly tall for feminine species, right? I'm gonna kick those hips back, give myself some room. So once you guys kind of have a comfortable foot placement, so again, mine, I like underneath my hips, toes slightly out. This is just a starting position. As you guys get better at deadlifting, everything will change. It always will change all the time. Your foot position from 500 pounds to 600 pounds will change. Your foot position from 200 pounds to 300 pounds will change. You'll kind of play with them all the time. Now we're going to go over where does the bar go when I set up. Does anybody have an idea?
Courtney?
In front of you.
It does go in front of you. That's awesome. So when I was taught in high school, very, very falsely, I was taught like just bang my shins up against the bar, and that's where we go. Keep the bar all the way to my shins, and that's where you start deadlifting. I'm a pretty large person. This doesn't work for me. Mid-foot is the better answer. I'm going to give you guys some visual cues so that we can understand what mid-foot works. So if I were to hold an imaginary bar in my hand in a firm deadlift position, and I look down, where that bar sits in my imaginary hands is where it should start over my midfoot, because that's essentially the straightest bar path possible. Does that make sense to everybody? So if you guys could, like nice imaginary bars, step over your bar so that you guys can figure out where that position is. The smaller human being you are, the closer the bar you're going to be. The larger of a human being, especially broad-chested or big quad humans, are going to be farther from the bar, unless you're a sumo puller. We're going to be much closer to the bar. Is everybody in their foot position? So guys, as we're going through foot position, I'm going to teach you guys one way, a cue, to kind of find your hip position. Again, sumo's a little different. We're going to go over that in a second. You can go sumo. Drew can help you with sumo, or we can stay dimensional and we'll go sumo on the backside. Either or. So, no one should move their bar from this position. If you touch the bar, it should stay exactly where it is all the way through your setup. Does that make sense, everybody? So if you've seen like this big giant strongman on TV and he goes like this, and then he rolls it into himself, you're not him. He's the strongest man in the world. He can do whatever he wants. But until you get that title, you should do what everybody else does. He's the anomaly, not the rule. That makes sense? So again, guys, I get my feet where I want them, roughly in my width and then depth from the bar. And then from here, guys, I'm going to bring my shins to the bar. So what that's going to do is that's going to determine my hip height. So I'm going to turn to the side for you guys to see what's going on here. So once I have my bar position, I bring my shins to the bar, not my bar to my shins. Shins to the bar. And that's pretty much going to be where my hip needs to be when I start deadlifting. This position in conventional will look different for everyone because we all have different torso and then femur length, right? So if you have like a short torso and gigantically long femurs, your butt's going to look like it's straight in the air. If you have like tiny, tiny femurs and a relatively normal or long torso, it's going to look like you're almost squatting, right? When you're all the way down here in your deadlift position. There is no right or wrong, as long as we're still moving in a straight up and down bar path. Questions as we're moving, guys. So we went over width and stance, bar placement on the foot, and now we're bringing the shins to the bar. Questions? So I'd like you guys to try and set up. And we're just going to get to the bar, hold the bar, and hang out in your setup from what we've just learned. There may be some adjustments, and that's fine. But again, stance, shins to the bar, try and grab that bar. So what we're looking for is like that, right? Shoulder as close to. So when you guys are deadlifting, your shoulder should be as close to or almost completely over the bar in this position. And relax and stand, guys. So we've gone over foot position, bar position on my foot. The next thing I'm going to go over is spinal position, right? So we pretty much have, we should all feel pretty comfortable with like hips down. Does that all feel like we're in a semi-decent position? We're going to work hips up now. So you guys have all heard me say this. Pinch your fucking shoulder blades. We're going to go a little bit deeper than pinch your shoulder blades. So pinching my shoulder blades means this, and that's okay, but this is not a great position for deadlifting because it looks like I'm shrugging. Got one, right? We're going to erase that shrug. Shrug answers off the board, right? I shrug when I deadlift. So we're going to learn how to depress our shoulder blades, right? So some training tools we can use. Drew, can you please show me? So how Drew's going to depress his shoulder blade. He's going to bring his arm out, and he's going to roll that blade down into his back pocket. So not only are they retracted down, but we're not letting them pronate, please. We're not letting them get this position, right? This is no. That's also, for Drew, 3 more inches at 600 pounds. Not going to be fun. Depress, retract, as deep as he can. Deep, 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 deep. So when Drew's deadlifting, you'll see him sink them down as far as you can. So everybody, just regular posture. You're just going to put your hands on your thighs. And just kind of make a mental note. If you guys had chalk or I was like one-on-one training, I'd literally chalk that mark, right on my thigh. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, I want you guys to think about how much more range, and this will come with time, strength, and mobility, right? Time, strength, mobility. How much further can I get these? So watch where I am, guys. This is my regular, normal posture. My hands are roughly cell phone-ish. And watch how much further I can get my shoulders down into position. So almost a full inch of position all the way down. What that's going to do is turn on these lats and engage my back. So other than my glutes, what's the next largest muscle? Lats, right? And in the deadlift, the lat does what? What to do? So it's definitely flared and it's a player, but it's going to, the lat, other than pulling, encases our spine and helps stack and isolate and hold that spine in that position, right? So the lat acts as a stabilizer in those positions. So we're going to take those shoulder blades and learn to get them down as deep as we can and pinch them as hard as we can. In this position, when you go to reach your butt back and push your shins to the bar, you should have a pretty flat belly. So we're gonna do the same thing, guys, except this time we're trying to pinch those shoulder blades, stack those scapula as deep as I can. Good. Set up, guys. So, guys, we have our foot placement, we have our stance width, we have shoulder blades pinned down as tight as we can, right? Now we need to get down to the bar. Like, we need to get there. Some of us in this position, it might be pretty difficult to make my way all the way down to the bar. Like, for me, if I do all that, right, and I get in this tight position, and I have to travel this like 37.5 inches to get all the way down here, by the time I get down here, I'm like, this is so bad. Right, I've moved the bar, I'm out of position. It's not really what's gonna go happen, that's not gonna work, right? So, there's a ton of different ways to start your deadlift. Every coach has different cues. I'm just gonna show you one for today. And there's a ton of different ones, especially if you guys pull sumo. So, I'm gonna spin this bar. And we're just gonna go over getting to my setup position, okay? So if you guys can't see me, you're more than welcome to come on this side, because you guys will be looking at my butt. So again, guys, I have my width, I have rough stance from the bar, okay? I'm gonna reach down, keep my shoulder blade stacked, I'm gonna grab the bar. So this is not a good spot to deadlift from, right? What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna do, so you guys have all watched our YouTube video on nice thoracic deep belly breathing, right? So we're gonna do a big deep belly breath, but I can't do it like this because I'm already too tight, and I surely can't do it like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reach down, and you may have seen or heard Coach Allen go in this position with my butt out of the way and my spine nice and flat and big giant belly space. I can feel myself, right? Because I have all this room. But if I'm always like this and I'm all jammed up, I can't feel my belly. So again, I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna reach, grab the bar, I'm gonna stack those blades, but as I do it, I'm gonna get a nice, tight, deep belly breath. I'm gonna expand all the way around my belly. If you guys have a belt, you should be thinking about filling the space in between my belt, excuse me. Big deep breath. I'm gonna sink, and as I sink, I bring my shins to the bar, and as I sink, I stack my spine, and then up, we start getting into that position, right? Now, that position, as opposed to the last time when I showed you guys, is significantly better, but can any of you guys see something that's still kind of out of position? My hips look high in reference to something else. So do you remember what we went over earlier, guys? Thoracic extension. So at 135, I'm gonna float this bar when I warm up. Drew's position's a little tighter and also a little stronger. At 245, Drew will float his position when he pulls slack out of the bar and his body. So Drew can set up and then big open up chest thoracic extension. Conventional or sumo? Sumo. So guys, Drew's a sumo puller. Not sumo and conventional have a lot of things in common. Stance and direction are big differences, but when Drew goes down, just pull the slack out, so float it. Drew sinks his hip, and as he pulls his chest into position, the bar starts to come up. Thank you. So when it looks like my hips may be a little high, when I get into position, as I open my chest and pull my thoracic, now that position starts to look really good. My shoulders are completely stacked over the bar. My hips look like they're in a better position. At 135, everything will come off the ground. But at 3, 4, the bar will bend, and I'll get into position. Then I can start my press. These are deadlift bars. They have a ton more whip. Just pull that up to the very edge, Drew. About 2 inches from the edge. Oh, that was on video, Drew. Gosh. That's okay. All right, where's yours at? Okay. So guys, when I pull this bar, I'm in very horrible form. Do not do this. There's a lot of play in that bar, right? Obviously these are out here because I'm trying to exaggerate that position. But at 3-ish, there's a good inch and some change out of that. That inch and some change allows much larger humans to get into those big deadlift positions, right? So just set up. It's all we've gone over today, right? So again, foot position, distance from the bar, bring my shins to the bar, right? Now I know where my hip height needs to be. This isn't a bad setup yet, but it can get better. As I take my big, deep belly breath, I sink my hips, I pull my scaps and shoulder up, and I pull the slack out of the bar. You can hear the slack on a deadlift bar. Some of the bars you might not be able to hear it, but there's gonna be a clink. Yeah. Right, there's gonna be a clink. That clink is me pulling the slack out of the bar, but I'm pulling it using my lats and scaps and some extension inside my thoracic. Does that make sense, guys? So if the bar comes off the ground, that's okay today. If you have great thoracic mobility, you might even not come off the ground, and that's okay also. We're gonna go over just that position. So again, set my foot width, set my foot depth, shins to the bar so I feel where my hip needs to be, push my butt back and up, sink, scaps, and then we should be tight. Questions on setup, guys?
What do you look at when you do it?
So guys, where you look is very, very dependent. As a coach, I will not fix where you're looking unless it is affecting where your spine is. So if you look down and it forces you to do this, I'll fix it. And if you look up and it forces you to do this, I'll probably fix it. But if you look up and it looks like this, so my natural curve, not like my exaggerated position, I'm not gonna fix it. Some deadlifters tuck their chin, lots of guys do it. Some deadlifters look up in the sky, lots of guys do it. There's no real, in these 3-4 vertebrae, if I have them here or here, I don't have a load on my neck. My load is attached to my scap, so it's deeper, way deeper, right? So if this position is affecting me, so like off topic, guys, but for benchers, you can always tell if somebody's got like a super front tight delt, or if you haven't done your delt work, when you bench, your head goes when you're pressing. Like when you press your neck, your delt will pull your head off the bench, right? So that's a tight delt, the pecs pulling the delt, all that position. If you guys haven't, you work on those positions. But in the deadlift, because the load is so far below my spine, I'm only gonna fix it if it looks like it's out of position. Same note, like if I should have a neutral spine, I should have a neutral neck and spine, but what if I'm deadlifting a desk and I have to turn my fucking head out of the way because the desk is, no, I can't keep my chin neutral because the deck, or an Atlas stone. Like I have to have some rounding because it's a stone. So purpose will always dictate position. The barbell straight up and down. So if it's not affecting my position, I'm not going to mess with it. Generally, neutrals are range, guys. So like this would be neutral, this is neutral, this is neutral. Extension, too much flexion, etc. Questions, guys? What's up?
At the risk of sounding stupid.
There's no stupid questions.
The thoracic breath, is it stomach out?
Diaphragmatic breath, right? So yes, it is stomach out. So when I breathe, guys, and again, we covered this in other videos, so go watch them. So I breathe in my nose. When I'm breathing, I'm filling my belly, big Buddha belly, big pregnant belly, I'm pushing it out, I'm filling it in all my directions, right? As opposed to when I go, and my chest moves, right? If I go with 600 pounds in my hand, what do you think is gonna happen? It's not gonna go, my chest isn't gonna open, which means I'm not gonna get air, which means I'm not gonna get oxygen into my muscles, which means I'm probably gonna fail my lift, right? I'm going in my nose, deep, deep draw in my stomach down, learning to brace that. But again, bracing, diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, we've gone over those in other videos. Try and get to those. Today is mostly deadlifting. Questions? Again, guys, we're just getting set up. Haven't even pulled yet. Bar might come off the ground. We're just getting set up. Question? All right, let's get back to our bars. All right. So guys, a deadlift is going to be a push and a pull. At the highest level, guys, understand this. It is quite difficult to understand pushing and pulling at the same time. So most of us think of one thing. We usually think of pulling the bar up my body and just kind of pulling back as far as I can. And that's great. That's a great concept, but we need to add the push too. So at the same time, I want to be thinking about pushing the floor from underneath me, right? So I'm starting to drive my legs through. This is super important, especially in our sumo, right? The sumo starts by driving through to get the hips closer to the bar. In the conventional, that quad push is what's going to be able to get my shoulders over the bar. So a little bit of quad to get my shoulders so that I can start to drive my glutes. If we're not wedging and pulling that thoracic, then my butt will shoot up in the air, right? So if I don't pull everything nice and tight, when I start to pull, right, I'll do this instead because I'm not using my lats and my scaps aren't stacked in position. You'll see that butt shoot up in the air and we end up doing like an RDL, right? So when we start to pull, I'm going to make sure that I'm using my lats to keep the bar pulled tight to my body. It should almost grind or kiss my body the entire way up. I'm wedging my hips. Instead of thinking about pulling the bar up, if you think about wedging your hips, anatomy will do the rest. The closer my hip gets to the bar, if my spine is in the right position, it will stand up. There's no way around it. You cannot leave your shoulders here and get your hips here. It's not going to happen. Not if your spine stays straight. If I pull my hips in like scissors, right? The end middle piece of the scissor moves when you play with them, like, right? Your body will do the same thing. This is my scissor joint. As I pull it closer, there's inevitably going to extend my hip. I'm going to bring my hip closer to the bar. My quads are going to lock out. I'm going to have a very nice clean deadlift. I'm going to see knees and hips lock out at the same time as best as I can. Everybody hands on the bar. Bring those hips up. Big deep breath. Get set. Slack. Butt should be down. Shoulders should be up. Pull. When you pull your slack out, more chest, butt comes down just a teeny tiny bit. So guys, it's kind of like a drop and pop, right? The hip comes down just a teeny tiny bit. As I set up, big deep breath. Ooh, hey now. Big deep breath. I drop my hips. It sets it up as I get the float. So there's a slight dip in the hip, slight dip in the hip. Drew, can you pull sumo? Very similar for the sumo. When Drew gets set, there's going to be a slight dip in his hip. He's going to push his quads out. He's going to come up. So, right, his hips are a teeny tiny bit high. Big deep breath. He pulls his extension. Slight dip. Good. Slight dip, pull, right? So as I'm getting set, right, I'm here, the bar's away from my shins. I pull down, I get the extension, 1, 2. Notice when I'm in this position, guys, the bar's still over midfoot. My shoulder's over the bar. I can wedge my hips into the bar. I'm still pulling back. I'm still using my lats. Still thinking about pulling, but I'm also thinking about wedging my hips in as best as I can. Hands on the bar, guys. So again, our hips come up, we take a big deep breath. Hips come down, pull the slack out, slack. 1, 2, 3. Pop. Good, guys, we're getting better, we're getting better. Put them down. Hands on the bar. Hips come up, take a big deep breath. Feel that belly, hips come down, pull the slack out. 1, 2, 3. Up. Good job, guys. Down. Did anybody feel like they were doing like the stripper butt thing where their butt shot in the air and then they finished their deadlift? I didn't see a lot. Did you see any? I didn't see a lot. Casey, did you see some? That is good. That's what we're looking for, guys. So again, when I'm doing my deadlift, I'm pulling the slack out. I set up by lifting up so I can feel my belly. I brace, pull the slack out, pull my chest up. Now I'm pressing through the floor, and as I press through the floor, I'm pulling my chest up and driving my hips through. Again, the bar stays pinned by using my lats. I'm pulling the bar into my hips as best as I can. If the bar feels like it's going to drift away from me, it's going to shift my center of gravity, right? So if you feel like you're getting on your toes, you're not using your lats and wedging your butt in and chest up, right? If you start with the bar too far away from you, when you go to deadlift, it'll pull back into you, and then you'll feel like you rock too far into your heels. Has anybody ever had that happen in a deadlift? Where you're like, whoa, kind of at the top, and like kind of surprised you because it was too far in front of you. We don't shrug the bar because my shoulders stay pinned, right? So I can't shrug the bar. There should be no reason to shrug the bar. Head position. Same as the setup, unless it's specifically affecting me, I'm not going to play with it, right? Guys, we're going to go over grips. So I don't do much powerlifting anymore, and I've never had a problem in jiu-jitsu with my grips. So for me, I pull straps out when I stop going double overhand. I've also already torn a pec and a bicep and a rotator twice, so I don't really like going switch grip anymore. But if you don't want to use straps because you still are interested in competing in powerlifting or using a one rep and things like that, you need to practice either your switch grip or your hook grip. Generally, for symmetrical purposes, I tell you to train double overhand as long as you can. But that being said, you can't train double overhand so much that you're only hook gripping or only switch gripping to the very heavy reps, because then you'll never get any practice, right? So we need to have a balance of them. Pick a number or a percentage in your head of when you want to switch them. If you're doing bodybuilding work, you should never sacrifice a larger muscle group for your forearm or fingers, right? So if you're doing bodybuilding and you're doing bent over rows and you can only hold 135, but you can efficiently bend over row 225, well, you're going to limit your back size and strength as opposed to your grip strength. So that would be counterproductive if you're a bodybuilder, right? So when you switch them is 100% up to you. If you're very uncomfortable and have baby little cute fingers and you want to keep them as long as you can, stay double overhand. If your cute little fingers hurt every time you do hook grip, practice your hook grip at the lighter weights. Hook grip is a skill. It takes time. If you only do it at the heavy weights, it's not going to be very fun. You're going to tear. You're not going to have some callus built up, and you're also not going to have the pain tolerance built up to do those hook grips. If you do switch grip and you just only save it for your very heavy reps, you may feel like you twist a little bit, right? Anybody ever felt like the deadlift is like twisting when they're doing it? It's because of we're not practicing enough switch grip, and one arm's pulling a little bit. Usually the arm that happens to be underhanded, right? Pulls a little bit harder. Sumo versus conventional, right? I've gone over everything else. No accessory work. I promise I'll get to accessory. Sumo versus conventional. Guys, sumo is not cheating. It's in the rules. You're allowed to, any way, shape, or form, pick the bar up from the ground to the locked out position, back down to the ground in a controlled manner with your hips underneath, your hips under your shoulders, on top of your knees, on top of your ankles. So, which should you do? There's a lot of research. Generally, whichever one feels more athletic, or whichever one your coach says looks better, or whichever one you can pull more, is probably the one that's going to work. There's a lot that goes into it. It has to do with limb length. So not only do my arms come into play, my torso comes into play, my femurs come into play, the length of my femurs. Also, if any of you guys have ever looked at the x-ray of a femur, the femur head can look like this, can this, and like all of it is still considered neutral or normal, right? Because we're all different humans. We don't all have perfect bones. That being said, if my humeral head sits like this and my hip capsule sits like this, I may never really have a great conventional. because I might just not be able to get the hip position in conventional. So play with them both. They both have their purposes. I also generally ask all of my powerlifters, even if they hate me for it, to learn both. As you guys have noticed in my CrossFit programming, every now and then you will see a sumo come up. And it's advantageous. And every now and then what happens is someone does sumo and then they switch from a conventional to a sumo puller because they realize sumo works better for them. So play around with all of them. They work muscles, the same muscles in different ways. So again, it's advantageous. I would say for your answer, I'm sorry, did you ask questions for accessory work? Where'd my accessory work? Was it accessory? Thank you. Your best accessory deadlift is the deadlift that you're not doing. So if you're a conventional puller, adding some sumo to your game is gonna bring you up. If you're a sumo puller, adding some conventional will definitely bring your sumo up. We've already played this. Some other supplemental lifts. Rows. So pen lay rows, bent over rows, single arm rows, but more rows. If I have a larger back, then I can stack my scaps and spine and I can transfer more power through my hips. That being said, when I'm in my bent over row position, I am holding an isometric deadlift position. When I'm in my pen lay row position, I'm actually in a deadlift position. So those are gonna benefit me. Hinging of any way, shape, or form, learning to get a better hinge. Even if you are a sumo puller, having a better hinge is going to help you. So sumo's a little bit more vertical, right guys? But learning to hinge properly is always gonna benefit you. So rack pulls, kettlebell swings, partial range of motions, pause deadlifts, these all help in your deadlift. If you have a very specific weakness, then you would go into isometric work. But generally, doing the lift slow and controlled in very tight technique and form is your best accessory. Doing a lift that looks like or is very similar to human movement patterns as the lift would be a good, we call it a supplementary work, right? So we would go deadlift, RDL, then we'd go into accessory work. For us, accessory work would be glute ham raises, reverse hyper, hamstring curls, anything to isometric glute holds. Accessory work can get really, really big. It can also just kind of be generalized. Really depends on where you're failing said lifts. I know a lot of it was going over setup, guys, and I know a lot of it was very much just getting to the bar, but the deadlift, the hardest part of the deadlift is the setup. Your setup is off a little teeny tiny bit. At 99, 100, 101, 102%, you'll miss. If it's off a smidget, if your hip's not in the right spot, your knees aren't the right spot, your shoulders aren't over the bar, you're gonna miss. It's that technical. Once it comes off the floor, as we noticed today, guys, how much faster and smoother was 1 inch than trying to pull from the floor? Like when we got into the part where you're like slack, 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 and then we all go stand, boom, and everybody's deadlift goes, flies up. It's because you're in a more advantageous position. Once it breaks the ground, that's when it starts getting easy. Lockout's a separate issue. Questions on what we went over today or anything that we didn't get on the board?
What about going back down? What do you mean? So you talked about you touch and goes, you don't, I know you talked to me before how you nice and quiet, nice and sweet, really simple, but before you get to the ground, like getting back down, I don't know if I can.
So guys, the eccentric motion of the exercise, right? So concentric is explosion and moving up in general, most positions, and eccentric is down and controlled, right? So if I'm doing my deadlift, my knees and hips should lock out almost at the same time, right? Generally, my knees lock out just slightly before my hips. That's pretty normal. So I'm just going to inversely reverse that action, right? So I'm gonna kick my hips back, and I'm gonna start cruising the bar down, and as the bar gets to my knee, then I'll start bending my knee. If I'm doing powerlifting, I'm going to hold on to the bar as tight as I can, I'm gonna take a deep breath, and I'm gonna get it to the floor before I pass out, right? If I'm doing bodybuilding, I might not touch the floor. I'm gonna stretch it all the way down, bring it back up. Stretch it all the way down, bring it back up. The one thing that I will see, and sometimes it happens to everybody, is if you unlock your knees and you're doing an AMRAP and you unlock your knees before you unlock your hips, that bar is gonna ride down your thigh, it's gonna shoot out away from you, it's gonna pull you on your toes and off your heels, and your next rep is gonna look shitty. Has anybody ever felt that happen? Like you're like, whoa, what the fuck? And then the bars get away from you, right? So you make sure we kick that hip back and reverse the motion in the direct opposite of the motion we started. Questions? Nothing? Awesome, guys. Do me a solid. Wipe down those bars. Put everybody's weights up. I hope everyone learned a little bit about deadlifting. Thank you guys very much for coming to play with me, and hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow.